There is a version of you that exists only in the eyes of others. It smiles when it should. It agrees when it should. It measures every word before it leaves your mouth, checking first whether the room will approve. You have been feeding that version of yourself for years, and it has grown fat, while the real one starved. But here is what almost no one asks. Starved of what exactly? You call it being polite, being professional, being liked. But somewhere underneath all of it, there is a man who no longer knows what he wants because he has spent so long calculating what others want from him. And that calculation, if you trace it back far enough, started long before you were old enough to notice it happening. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, and still he wrote to himself at night, reminding himself not to waste what remained of his life, measuring his worth by other men's opinions. Think about that for a moment. The single most powerful man on earth, with more approval available to him than any human in history, still had to fight this battle in private. So if you think this weakness is unique to you, you are wrong. It is the oldest war a man faces, the war between the self he performs and the self he actually is. Every time you swallow your true opinion to keep the peace, every time you choose the safe version of yourself because the honest one might not be accepted, every time silence from someone else makes you replay the last hour of your life, searching for what you did wrong. That is the performance, taking another piece of you, and you don't notice the theft because it never happens all at once. It happens one small surrender at a time, until one day you look at your own life and do not recognize the hands that built it. The question is, how many pieces are already gone? This is the quiet tragedy Seneca warned about. He said, "Men do not lose their lives all at once. They lose them in fragments, spent on other people's expectations, until there is nothing left to call their own." You are not failing at life. You are simply spending it on the wrong audience. And once you see that clearly, you cannot unsee it. Watch how it works. A man wakes up already bracing for judgment. Before he has even left the house, he rehearses conversations that haven't happened yet. He edits his own opinions in advance, softening anything that might make someone uncomfortable. By the time he actually speaks to another human being, the words that come out are not his. They are a negotiated settlement between what he believes and what he fears. Others will think of him for believing it. Somewhere in that negotiation, the original man goes missing entirely. This is not humility. This is not wisdom. This is a man who has handed the keys to his own mind to a crowd that isn't even paying attention to him. And that last part is the detail that should unsettle you most, because here is the truth that stings the most. The people you are performing for are not watching as closely as you think. They are consumed by their own performance, their own fear of judgment, their own silent war. The audience you have built your entire identity around is mostly imaginary. You have spent years directing a play for a theater that is nearly empty. Sit with that image for a second, because it changes everything that comes next. Epictetus taught his students a brutal but freeing distinction. Some things are within your control, and everything else is not. Your reputation, other people's opinions, the way a room reacts to you, none of that is yours to control. What is yours is your judgment, your effort, your response. The moment you understand this, you stop wasting your strength trying to manage something that was never yours to manage in the first place. And once that strength is no longer being drained, something in you starts to change. This is where the shift begins, not in some dramatic collapse, but in a quiet, almost boring decision to stop asking, "Will this be accepted?" and start asking, "Is this true for me?" That question feels small the first time you ask it, but it is the beginning of taking your life back from an audience that was never real. Small questions asked enough times have a way of rewriting a man entirely. Understand this clearly. Turning inward does not mean turning cold. It does not mean abandoning people or duty or discipline. The Stoics were not hermits. They lived fully in the world, in families, in politics, in war. What they refused to do was let the world cast the final vote on their own worth. A Stoic can stand in a crowded room, disagreed with by everyone in it, and still walk out with his sense of self completely intact. That is not arrogance. That is architecture, an inner structure strong enough that it does not collapse the moment someone shakes it. But architecture like that is not built overnight, and it is not built in public. Most men never build that structure because building it requires something uncomfortable. Solitude, not loneliness. Solitude, the difference, matters more than it sounds. Loneliness is the absence of people. Solitude is the presence of yourself, without distraction, without performance, without an audience to manage. And most men avoid this space entirely, because when the noise finally stops, what's left is often a stranger, desires you buried, opinions you silenced, a version of yourself you have not spoken to in years. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you sat in silence long enough for that stranger to speak? This is why silence frightens men who have spent their whole life being watched, not because silence is empty, but because it is the first place the truth gets a chance to speak without competition. Marcus Aurelius returned to this same discipline every single night, withdrawing from the noise of Rome to examine his own mind, without an audience, without performance, alone with what was actually true. If an emperor needed that ritual to stay whole, what does it say? That most men today never schedule a single minute of it. That is the discipline this video is asking of you. Not retreat, not isolation, a returning, a refusal to keep spending your only life on a courtroom that was never going to deliver a final verdict anyway, because the jury changes its mind every single day. You cannot win a trial that never ends. You can only stop attending it. Picture two men standing at the edge of the same decision. One asks the room what it thinks before he moves. The other asks himself what is true and moves, regardless of what the room decides. Afterward, 10 years pass. The first man is still adjusting, still recalculating, still performing an identity built entirely out of other people's approval, and still somehow empty. The second man has scars, has been disagreed with, has been misunderstood more than once, and still somehow whole. The difference between them was never talent, it was never intelligence or luck or circumstance. It was where each one placed his center of gravity. You get to choose which of those men you become, starting with the very next decision you make today. Not a grand decision, a small one. The next time you feel the old pull, the urge to check the room before you speak, The urge to soften a true thing because it might not be liked. Pause. There. That pause is the entire war. Everything the Stoics taught comes down to what happens in that single pause. Because the moment you stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, what is actually true? You are no longer performing a life. You are finally living one, and no audience, real or imagined, can ever take that back from you again.